Yep.
Yes, can Scrum everywhere be taken too far? So I guess we've been talking about Scrum being used in organizations from top to bottom, and Joe's example of Bosch, clearly they're using that all the way from the board down. But I guess, are there situations, scenarios in which actually Scrum's not the right thing to do? It's not appropriate. And how might we define where those are?
I think there's actually a really simple example, which is you shouldn't run a fire department with Scrum. You shouldn't run an ambulance with Scrum.
And why is that?
Well, because it comes back to impediments. The whole idea of the sprints and the backlog is there's a list of things we want to do. It's predefined. Anything that's not on that list is regarded as a threat to that list. And so Scrum actually has, as well, Joe was talking about multitasking, right? It's bad to multitask, and we don't like to be interrupted in Scrum. And you don't want firemen working off a backlog. You can't give them
quite
a sprint.
Like them to be interrupted.
Yes, they need to be interrupted. Yeah. So for a fireman, being interrupted is the job. It's not a dysfunction. It's not an impediment. And people that try to apply Scrum to things that are fundamentally unpredictable or interrupt driven just create suffering for themselves.
Absolutely. So in those scenarios, there are processes that we can use. I mean, I guess there's a framework called Cynefin, which describes it's a framework for determining what type of complexity you're dealing with. So there's, I guess we're talking about the domain of the unknown unknowns, the unpredictable scenarios in which actually we're dealing with a complex environment, whereas Scrum does a good job of trying to turn complex environments into complicated environments. So I guess processes that live in the complex domain, like Kanban, for example, might be a more appropriate thing to use in those scenarios.
Yeah, I mean, if you bring it back to Cynefin, it's not fire, for example, is not a complete unknown. You know that there are going to be fires. You know what to do largely when you get there, but you don't know when the fires are going to arrive or necessarily how many of them. And so what you have to do is just have people with a tremendous amount of slack in the system. If we go anywhere around Auckland or Wellington, we will find a lot of firemen doing push-ups. Waiting for a fire to be there, and they can't go, we're at fire A and we're at fire B, and this is not, we prioritize this and the fire product. Yeah. That's fundamentally ridiculous.
Absolutely.
But what I think Scrum does is say to a lot of organizations, we use this analogy in organizations. I've been spending all week firefighting. And we're not doing it in a heroic way. We're doing it in a way that we've created all these organizational fires basically through our own confusion. We've actually taken something in Cynefin which should be kind of barely complex to complicated, and through being disorganized, we've made it, well, actually chaotic.
Yeah.
And so we are going through those accents respond loops all the time because we've let our service catch on fire. We've let all these things get out of control.
On the flip side, though, there are organizations within which actually there are unpredictable events. I mean, support organizations, call desks, those sorts of things. Actually, you know they're going to come along, but you have no idea when they do. And as we've kind of said before, Scrum obviously doesn't quite fit, but for those, they are truly complex. And actually, other processes like Kanban do deal with those well. I guess it's just identifying those that are intentionally unknown, as opposed to the ones that we've created, the problems we've created ourselves, the fires we've created ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, if you go back to Scrum's real origin, I'm talking about 1986 sort of Scrum, and it was designed as something to deal with what we call wicked problems in those days. And a wicked problem was fundamentally something that didn't have a solution. So if you think about it, it's closely aligned with what Cynefin would call complex, because it's not like filling a glass of water. You can't go, right, once I have put 250 mils in a glass of water, then I have a glass of water. All we can do is make things better or worse. And as a result of there being no solution, there's no stopping rule. So it's not like, oh, I'm now going to drink the glass of water, and now that it's empty, it's empty. There's no natural signal to stop, which is why they put in the time boxes, which is you've now done. In those days, it was a month, because they were actually building hardware, not software. And it was like, right, now that you've spent a time of a month, you want to invest another month. And so the whole point of time was to put in an artificial stopping rule for something that had no end.
Is that true of all the problems that we're applying Scrum to, though? So
Not anymore, no.
Actually, no. I mean, there's a lot of scenarios in which we've got a reasonable idea of what the benefits and outcomes we're trying to achieve are. It's just the process of getting there is a bit more. It's a bit less understood.
So to be clear, I'm saying that this is where the time box and sum originated. If you read the new product development game, that's why time boxes were there, and so that was Scrum's original context, was dealing with these fundamentally wicked problems. And I think this is what causes people to do what Martin Fowler causes flaccid Scrum, where they start breaking all the rules because they're not dealing with complex problems anymore. They're dealing with complicated, or in a lot of cases, simple problems.
And actually, they should just get on and analyze it.
Yes, they should just go ahead and do it. And it'd be fundamentally ridiculous, like building a big map using a probe sense respond loop, right? Big map is probably the most ontologically simple thing in the world.
Fair enough. All right. So clearly there are scenarios in which taking Scrum in is not appropriate.